righty, we get to the main event, and this is the one that they sold the program on, obviously. Samoa Joe and CM Punk for the Owen Hart Tournament semifinal. And somebody told me on Twitter that I was not crazy, that the initial bracket that I saw, I thought it looked like it would be Joe and Punk in the finals. And it's not, but somebody said that the original bracket they saw was the same thing and somehow it was changed. And I don't know for whether that's true or not, but I would love clarification just so I know if I have a brain tumor. But nevertheless, this was the main event. Joe comes out and then, like Mussolini in the wilds of Canada. And, you know, they had to follow, basically, I know Scorpio Sky was right there, but they had to follow the match, FTR and Gin and Juice, and nobody could follow that match, but it was a completely different kind of match between Joe and Punk in that they had the people. The people wanted to see it. It was over. They were in no hurry. They didn't open up 100 miles an hour and have nowhere to go for 20 minutes. They did the stare down. They did the feeling out because it had the big fight feel. And the story they were telling earlier was Punk was evading Joe's chops, right? He'd always duck it or get out of the way or whatever. But then Joe did the deal where he walks off on the crossbody and Punk crashed. And then Joe started landing the chops and Punk would sell them big. And then the jabs, and Punk could fight from underneath because he's the smaller guy. Joe's the big bully. He's on top. He's a good heel. He taunts the fans. He has the facial expressions, so we're having a wrestling match again. Imagine that, two on the same show. And then they took a break, but when they came back, Punk started fighting back. Both of them were tired and selling. Punk, his mouth was bleeding. I don't believe he bladed his tongue, so I don't think he's got Moxley's disease, but they were landing some shots. And then Joe gets the sleeper, rear naked choke, whatever. Punk gets a belly to back. Boom. Then they go back and forth. And Punk with a series of knees in the corner and a clothesline. The elbow off the top and gets a 2 count. And then again, they go back and forth. Punk goes for the GTS. And Joe gets the crossface. Punk gets the ropes. Joe hits that quick power slam, gets a 2 count. And then because the precondition with Punk earlier at the top of the show, the people are chanting Owen Hart, which is great to hear. And then finally, they're more back and forth. Joe went for the sleeper. Punk dropped out, reached his legs up, hooked Joe, rolled him up, 1, 2, 3. And so Punk advances. And both of them were still selling the result and then recovering. And then they milked it and stared at each other. And then Joe comes out and offers his hand. And Punk looks at him and takes it, and they shake, and the people cheer. And then Joe snatches him into the sleeper. And did you see, as soon as they went down, the bell started ringing to give it some sense of urgency. And the referee was in there, and Kevin Kelly sounds like Lance Russell. Oh, come on. And he snatched a sleeper out of a handshake, and it sounded and looked like a dirty goddamn deal. And Joe puts Punk out, and then rolls out and gets a chair, but before he can do damage, here comes FTR. And then the last day of Starks comes out to survey what's going on. And they had a good match, but that's why I was saying to me, this is build for an eventual bigger Punk and Joe match. Because now Punk and Starks is the final. Well, that's right now the way it's presented, 2 baby faces. But will Joe cost Punk the win of the cup out of heat over this without Starks knowing, so that Starks is still nominally a baby face? And then could Starks get mad at Joe and say, well, goddamn, I want to fight you, Samoa Joe. You tarnished my win. And then Punk make it cost Joe a match with Ricky Starks. Starks gets a win over Joe. But it's because of there's things you can do out of all of this to eventually want Punk and Joe to collide again in a bigger match on a bigger stage. We'll see what happens.
Let's talk about, and by the way, great match, great commentary, great match. I'm happy that we're going to hopefully see more from these two. Ricky Starks, though. So he comes out there at the end. You're not really mentioning him, and, we're talking more about the future of Punk versus Joe. What do you do with Starks? He's now one of the baby faces on that show. If Powerhouse Hobbs turns, he's a baby face. I don't know what Scorpio Sky is officially. I guess maybe a heel. But Ricky Starks versus Punk, who would you have go over to win the tournament? And secondly, any consideration you think should be put into a Ricky Starks heel turn? Have they ridden the wave of him as a babyface, especially if he's not going to be a top babyface, as far as they can?
Possibly, because they keep ruining their own waves. In a one-on-one match, fairly and squarely, Punk has to beat Starks. In a one-on-one match, if Starks was to turn heel and fuck Punk, I think it's early or misplaced for that. In a one-on-one match, if Joe causes Punk to lose to Starks, whether Starks knows about it and turns heel or doesn't know and remains a babyface, that works for me. That's the thing. I think if Punk wins this, there could be some backlash from some segments that have already been preconditioned. Well, now he has to come in and win the Owen Cup, and Owen wouldn't have liked him. Well, he would have, but Owen wouldn't have liked him. Whatever. And Punk doesn't need the Owen Cup. But Punk could certainly get a good program out of the guy that fucks him out of it. But right now, Starks is, I know you want to elevate Starks, but I don't think he's ready there unless it's a TV match thing, but Punk would have to win. Punk would have to win, and it couldn't be a long program. So I'm pretty sure with the heads involved in this Saturday night program, there's something that's probably going to make sense, but that we're not thinking about, or is going to be in some element of the parameters I just talked about, that's going to happen rather than Punk just winning the thing and being carried out of the ring on somebody's shoulders, possibly.
In terms of what he's been saying in the promos or anything, now we saw him injure Roderick Strong, even though Roddy's more part of the Adam Cole MJF canon. And now this with CM Punk seemingly leading to bigger things. What is Samoa Joe's motivation?
Well, again, if everybody that has gotten to this point had proper build from the start, Joe always works best when he's presented as just the Samoan submission machine and the fucking badass that doesn't put up with bullshit and bullies people and uses his size. And he could be a dominant heel on a champion of some description and on any program. So hopefully he's going to stay in the top singles mix on Collision. I don't care what he does on Wednesday nights. And, again, with Punk as firmly the top babyface and Joe definitely at or near the top of the heel list on this program, that's why I say their paths are going to collide, no pun intended, again. And Joe's motivation is just he's got to want to win and to beat as many people as he can beat. And it would help if there was a good babyface secondary champion in this company, but there's MJF is the champion, and everybody else in the company has a fucking belt. And I know Joe's got the Ring of Honor TV title. Ring of Honor doesn't have television. So that tends to compromise that somewhat. I would, if I were operating this fucking vehicle, I would have Joe as the not secondary, I hate to term it that way, but the United States champion or the Intercontinental champion on this program exclusively. That's what I'd do if I were me, because we still got to get back to Punk and MJF, but that's going to take a while.
Yeah, and the other problem, like you said, is everyone has a belt. Even people who aren't even wrestlers here show up with other belts.
So that diminishes everything, but...
It happened on this show with Willow Nightingale and Athena.
Oh, I forgot about that. I was petting Harley's belly.
They're talking about Willow losing, was it the IWGP Women's title? She just lost that in Japan to Julia. So they're talking about this other title loss, which I don't know if it had been referenced before on the show. And then Athena walks in with another belt because she's not the AEW Women's Champion. Was she? Ring of Honor Women's Champion. Again, there's just too many champions on these shows.
But overall, excellent program. We have no ratings. It's the weekend, but we will update that, I guess, on the drive-thru this week.